Everyone. It is just about maybe 1 minute after 7, so we'll go ahead and get started here. We appreciate you coming out tonight. This will be as best we can, a duplication of what we did on Sunday. Then we'll have, as far as the presentation goes, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. I'd remind you, this is not a formal voters meeting. This is just for information. So there will be no motions, there will be no voting. You're not even taking minutes tonight. It's just for your information only. The agenda for this evening, Pastor Schultz will open us with a devotion, and then we'll review basically how we got here. We'll start with the Facility Planning Committee review, the Building Committee, then Danny Olson, our chair of the Building Committee, will present the plans that we have for you, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we would finance it and the construction. So with that, I would turn it over to Pastor Schultz for devotion, if he's ready.
Yeah, is your pack on?
Pardon me?
Is your microphone
I thought it was on.
All right. You just weren't very loud. Sorry, I was getting the video ready. I'm unprepared. All right. Just a brief word from the Lord. Chapter 4 of Ephesians, I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you are called to one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. And I love that verse, and I think that's such an important, or those verses, I think those are such important verses at times where congregations seek to maybe do big things or bigger things that are potentially divisive, things where people say, well, I wanted, well, I want, well, we always did this, I want, right, I want, and it's really easy for congregations to get embroiled in discord and disharmony and all those things. And I really like the words, right? Walk in a manner worthy of our calling to which we have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. And so I think those are good words from the Lord. I also think Psalm 127 is really good as we think about the church and what is the church. I think so often people have their own inclinations of what church is, and especially if you plant a church, or if your grandparents planted the church, or your great-great-great-grandparents planted the church, and you're the fourth generation at the congregation, we have a lot of ideas of what church is. And, I want great pastors, check. I want, right, this program or that program. I want this. And those things become more important than what the Lord wants. And it's always, I think, very important to remember what the Lord wants. The Lord wants to give you his gifts, Sunday by Sunday, day by day, in this place, to give you his gifts of forgiveness, life, and salvation in word and sacrament. And that's what the church is really all about. It's not about what I want, but it's what the Lord wants. And not only does the Lord want to give us his gifts, but then the Lord wants us to be part of his mission and ministry. And so as a congregation, we must always, pastor and people together, be looking at what the Lord is laying in front of us in terms of mission and ministry, that mission of seeking and saving the lost. And what is the Lord laying before us? I mean, one of the really significant things that I think he's laid before us is the partnership with the Lutheran congregation in Zacapa, Guatemala, since I've been here. The partnership with Alaska Mission for Christ since I've been here. And now I think the Lord is laying before us some space kinds of issues, or space opportunities for the mission and ministry in this place that will help to expand what we're able to do here in terms of sharing the gospel. But again, right, any building that gets built isn't for me, it's not for you, it's not, all right, that's not the primary reason. Will we all benefit? Well, absolutely, but that's not the driver of anything a congregation does, or it's not God's church. And so Psalm 127 says these words, and I really like these words. Psalm 127, verse 1. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stay awake in vain. And I think that's a good reminder that it's the Lord who builds. We're simply along for the ride. And so as we look at these plans, you need to know that these are not my plans. I actually had somebody say one time, we have to get our plans in order. Pastor Schultz will put his in place. So silly, right? These aren't my plans. I've been thinking about these things for 10 years. The building committee and the architect did even better than I imagined. And so as you look at these, understand that these are kind of a cross-section of the congregation's ideas and plans for the mission and ministry in this place. And certainly I've had a part in that, but it goes well beyond me. And I think that's a good thing. So Doug and Danny just have a fabulous presentation today. The building committee has done such great work. Our architect is just phenomenal, and really laud and commend the work that they've done on this entire project. So I think you'll be impressed. Hopefully you've looked at the pictures already and already are kind of impressed. So we'll pray, and then Doug can continue. Gracious Heavenly Father, we do rejoice and give you thanks for the opportunities that you lay before us. First of all, that opportunity of coming here Sunday by Sunday and receiving your gifts of word and sacrament, forgiveness, life, and salvation, and being renewed and restored in a right relationship with you, and then empowered by your Holy Spirit to leave this place and be Christ to the world around us. We ask that you would continue to bless the mission and ministry of beautiful Savior that you lay before us. Help us to have discernment as we continue forward in faith. Help us to have discernment as we look at these drawings this evening, discernment for where you might be leading us. And let us walk together in faith, following where you lead. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Hey, thank you, Pastor. Can everyone hear me? He said my mic was kind of quiet. Good? Okay, thank you. All right, so the agenda's on the screen. Let's talk real quick before we get into other details about the timeline. Pastor said this is something he's been thinking about for about 10 years. The timeline, as you'll see, is something that the congregation has been working towards diligently as far as putting pen to paper, so to speak, for a little over the last 2 years. So while things have been in people's heads, we've really started moving forward over about the last 2 years. So in May of 2017, we formed a facility planning committee. And we'll talk a little bit about why we did that in the next couple of slides, but everything really started in May of 2017. So then in March of 2018, the Facility Planning Committee came back with recommendations to the congregation about what we should do as far as moving forward, and then we also approved $24,000 to be spent for preliminary drawings to be filed with the city. And again, we'll get into more details of all these in the next few slides. April of 2018, we formed the building committee. Excuse me. November of 2018, the building committee came back and presented the preliminary floor plans and renderings, which you've seen in the narthex since November. At that time, we also, the Voters Assembly also approved spending up to 90% of our 2018 budget surplus for detailed drawings, which would allow us to move forward with actual permitting and construction should we choose to do that. December of 2018, We had filed everything with the city. The City of Olathe Planning Commission finally approved our plans, and then in January of 2019, the Olathe City Council approved. And what that means for us is that now, as far as moving forward, we have our place with the city to expand. Really, the neighbors and the community around has really no influence on what we can do so long as we stay within the guidelines that we filed with the city. And then in January of 2019, just talk about the money a little bit more. Council allocated $148,411 of the 2018 surplus for those detailed drawings. And again, we'll talk about why that number here in a little bit. So the Facility Planning Committee, as I said, it was formed in May of 2017. The biggest reason was we were growing. We had a tremendous growth spurt at that time, and we saw very limited resources for our ministry. Some of you may recall we would go to Olathe East for fellowship events because we didn't have space here. The preschool growth was limited because the space downstairs. Our youth didn't have a dedicated space. If you recall, they were at the house in the basement for a while. When they outgrew that, and the feeling was that they were kind of pushed away from the rest of the congregation, we brought them back over, and now they're in one of the classrooms downstairs. So they didn't have a dedicated space. Another big driver was this housing development. You've all seen this for the last 2 or 3 years. In November, I believe it was November of 16, that developer approached us to talk about their plans, and we started talking about that impact to us. And one of our members suggested that we go ahead and proceed with those preliminary drawings that I mentioned earlier in order to file with the city, basically to get our place, if you will. I keep using that term, that's probably a better term, but all in all, so that the city knows of our plans to expand and we don't have to go through all the neighbors again and get their approval to do that. So, excuse me, the Facility Planning Committee, in order to determine what we needed to do, had an online and hard copy survey for the congregation. Some of you may have done that. They also interviewed our staff, and then they came back with their initial concepts that looked something like this. I don't have the pointer yet. Let's see if I can grab one. You got one there? Thank you. Forgot all about that. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. So this plan, it was presented at the voters' meeting where we received approval for the $24,000 for the preliminary drawings. And you can essentially see that if this is our existing sanctuary, the proposal was to expand the sanctuary to the south and to the north, build a fellowship hall, and then ultimately a gymnasium with drive and parking to the west. So it's just along that side, the drive and the parking, gymnasium, fellowship, sanctuary expansion. So you'll see when we get into the other drawings that that is similar with some changes that were driven by basically necessity for the city requirements. Some of that, the city is very specific on what they require. Sorry. Traffic flow, we also found that it's kind of difficult as far as the in and out on the street. So some of the things you'll see were driven purely by outside factors. So the building committee, they were formed in April of 2018. They interviewed 3 architectural firms and ended up hiring Herman Sharhag Company. In addition to the architect, we hired a civil engineer, and we filed those preliminary plans with the city of Olathe. We did have to rezone the northernmost portion of our property north of the house, which was still ag. We rezoned that to R1. That was approved. And as I said, we received approval from the Planning Commission in December of 18 and the City Council in January of 19. The building committee recommendations, and this will tie into the renderings you've seen in the narthex. Phase 1 was a fellowship hall, classrooms, and the parking. We would need to do all of our parking and drive work to the west before we could really do any more building. That retention pond to the west would all be filled, and a new retention pond would be built to the far north. So all of that civil work would have to be done at that time. Phase 2 would be a new sanctuary with classrooms down below and offices to the south. And then phase 3, we have it titled a gymnasium. That could still be determined what our need is. Maybe it's a gymnasium, maybe it's a 2-story classroom building, depending on what our congregation needs at that time. It's a little farther down the road. And then at the time these recommendations were made, we had a phase 4, which is an office expansion. And you'll see later that has changed a little bit as well. And these are just some of the renderings that were presented back in November. Those are still out in the narthex. This will be the west elevation, the sanctuary. Sanctuary with the steeple, new fellowship hall, and then the gymnasium and the office addition. And here it is just in plan again, where we have the sanctuary, the 2-story fellowship hall, gymnasium, and office expansion. So this is the parking I was talking about. All of this would really need to be constructed before we could move forward with any of the other phases. So we'll have significant civil engineering costs in phase 1 that we probably would not have in phases 2 and 3. Okay. I'll turn it over now to Danny Olson to walk us through the detailed floor plans that the building committee came back with. Yeah, got it.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, awesome. Okay, so I am Danny Olson. I am the chair of the building committee, and we, as Doug said, were formed like a year ago to start working with the architect and the congregation and the civil engineering to come up with potential building plans for the congregation. Initially, again, our job was simply to get plans filed with the city to make sure we had placeholders so that when our congregation decided to build, we could, and we were not inhibited by our new neighbors at all. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the first couple slides are just overviews. So all of the buildings in the 3 phases would be 2-story, like our current building. And as you can see, this is the top view of the second phase, or of the second floor of all the phases. So again, this would be Sanctuary Narthex. This would be Fellowship Hall. And this is phase 3, and we're really not going to talk about phase 3 at all. And the reason for that is it's not in our immediate future. It's really probably not even in our 5-year plan. It is there as a placeholder. So the city would allow us at some point to build something there. We made the footprint of phase 3 as big as we could get it on the land, because when and if Beautiful Savior decides to build there, we can always go smaller, and the city doesn't have issue with that, but it would be a lot harder to try to go bigger. We would have to start the process over again. So we just put the biggest footprint we possibly could on file with the city for that space, but we really didn't plan to put anything there. It's so far down the road, the congregation could decide to never build, the congregation could decide to make it a gymnasium, the congregation could decide to make it anything they wanted, but it is on there as a placeholder with the city to make that easier for the congregation in the future. These are the first floors of the proposed phases. Again, you'll see that phase 3 is blank. Phase 2 is preschool classrooms and church offices. Phase 1 is Sunday school classrooms, youth rooms, bathrooms, things like that. And now we'll get into more fine detail. So this is proposed phase 1, second floor. So this is what we're calling the fellowship hall. So as you can see, it's pretty much just a big open area. This would enable us to have full congregational dinners, meetings, meals without having to rent out the high school or rent out another building or do it in multiple nights. It would seat anywhere from 500 to 575 people comfortably, depending on the shape of the table that we selected to put in. It does have a lot of storage built in, bathrooms, commercial kitchen, pantry, stair exit down to the bottom level. Those are outside stairs. These are inside stairs and an elevator. This is the hallway bridge that would go from where we are now to the fellowship hall. It would actually go through this window, where this window is right here, would be the bridge over to the fellowship hall. It's close enough that these bathrooms that will be added could be used on a Sunday morning very easily. It would enable us to, between services, have fellowship time out there without getting yelled at by Pastor Schultz. I always seem to get
Encouraged, not yelled at.
encouraged to be in Bible study and not talking. Okay. And just so you guys kind of have a concept of how large this building is, I know it's really hard to see, but check your pictures in your email when you get home on your computer and you'll be able to see it better. But right here is a full-size basketball court. So the building is quite large. So just some zoomed in pictures, bathrooms, again, right off that entrance from the sanctuary in Narthex. Full commercial kitchen. Just for some perspective, this kitchen is about 2.5, 3 times the size of the one we have now. It would be a true commercial kitchen. Commercial dishwasher, commercial freezers, commercial refrigerators, all of the things. There's a pass-through window, giant pantry, storage. So this is the front, what would that be, southwest corner of the building. Again, elevator from top to bottom, stairwell, storage. So you'll notice a lot of storage built into this building. Part of the reason for that is if you plan on seating almost 600 people, you have to have somewhere to put all the tables and chairs and things that go with that. So that's what that is. Again, more storage. And the architect did tell us that this is actually probably more storage than we need for just the tables and chairs, which was actually a good thing, because then if we did use it for other things, there would be a place to put that, right? So if at some point the kids did use it for basketball, since it's big enough, we would have a place to put all of those things. Okay, so this is still the fellowship hall, phase 1. This is the lower level. This is just a big overview. As you can see, all of these are classrooms and bathrooms. Again, there's the stairwell and the elevator that we saw upstairs. Bathrooms. This new space is the youth room. So this would replace what we were trying to do in the house and give the youth actually some really great usable space. Just for some perspective on size, that youth room is 2,300 square feet. I don't know about you, but that's bigger than my house, so that is a lot of space for our youth. Would give them great room to interact, play, hang out, have a lock-in. They wouldn't have to sleep in the sanctuary like they do now when they have lock-ins. Be a great space for them to utilize. Here's where those stairs come down from the upstairs kitchen. We really liked the idea of these outdoor stairs being off the kitchen for a couple reasons. One, it gives us a place to put trash receptacles, which is a really good thing when you have a kitchen. And then the other part was this space out here could be green space or concreted space that could be used for picnics, barbecues, things like that, and would allow us to be able to go up and down from the kitchen. Okay, so again, here is the walkway that would bridge the two buildings. I believe this comes out right where Pastor Schultz, your office is, right? Right downstairs, and would bridge the two. This long corridor hallway is actually labeled for trustee storage so that they would have a place to put. Pam's like, yay! Okay. And then this is also labeled storage. It's a little hallway area that goes to all the classrooms, and here's bathrooms. And this is this the mop sink? Yeah, this is the little janitor closet with a mop sink for him, close enough to the walkway that he could easily, or she could easily go between the two buildings. This is the youth room that we were talking about. Just kind of have it played out there with a little bit of lounge space. They could have tables, great big open space, little kitchenette area if they so desired. Would also be great if we had a rainy day at VBS. There you go. Classrooms, again, this is the southwest corner of the building. There's your elevator, stairs, entryway in and out of the building from the new parking lot that would be right out here. There's space for offices right here, a little waiting area. storage room, offices, classrooms, conference room, classrooms. I know you're seeing a lot of offices that don't necessarily have a specific use labeled on them at this point, but the thought process is we don't want to spend a bunch of money, build a bunch of buildings, and then in 5 years say, oh, it's not big enough, it won't meet the current needs of our congregation. So we have a lot of flexible spaces that as the congregation grows, if we needed extra staff members, which if we grew to fill the new sanctuary, we would definitely need that, they would have places to office out of.
Danny?
Yes.
Or those walls are all removable, so it could be a ninth classroom too.
Correct. Flexible space. Okay. So that was phase 1. This is phase 2, which would actually be the building and expansion of the sanctuary and the existing preschool. So just to give you an idea of the size of this expansion, this part right here is our whole current building. All of this is new. When we originally got the plan from the facility planning committee that Doug showed, the kind of really rudimentary one that just had pretty similar plan, but it went out instead of long. When we sat down and started talking with the architect, that was, we all came to a consensus that that was probably not the best idea, to go wider instead of out. It just made it very hard to, for preaching and listening and all of those things. It also did not make the best use of our land. It didn't leave us any room to build a whole lot of anything else if we went wider instead of further out. It just was very limiting. This plan, again, makes the best use of our land, the best use of our space, gives our congregation everything we need now, and hopefully everything we would need for the next 5 to 10 years. It gives us great flexibility. So this would be built to have the sanctuary would hold up to 600 people at one time, which would be great on Easter Sunday especially, and Christmas Eve. I'll have seats. It'd be wonderful. We wouldn't have to fill it up initially. We could put in, seats only to here and leave this back space open. For some perspective, this is the corner right now where all of our musical equipment is. That area is about 3 times the size of what we currently have for bells and choir and piano and all of the musical instruments. As you can see, the altar would be in the same place that it is now. It would just be larger. Communion rail, again, would be larger. Soundboard would stay where it is. Again, larger space. This space right back here is our long-anticipated and asked-for cry room. So this would be a space that the front windows would all be glass so that mom, dad, whoever could see out and see what was going on. There would be sound piped in so that they could hear, but we would not be able to hear the meltdown in the cry room. Okay, this is the new narthex area. So doors to the sanctuary, cry room, storage, coats, larger mailbox area. Here again, going out where this window is would go across to the fellowship hall. Existing bathrooms. This is the existing altar guild room. As you can see, that would be turned into and available for a music room, for storage, we have a great congregation with a ton of very talented musicians that lug a lot of their things back and forth to bless us on Sunday mornings. So this would be an area where they could actually keep some of their musical instruments, which would be very nice. This is the existing kitchen, which would be turned into the new altar guild room. Coat closets would remain. current fellowship hall would remain and would be turned into a meeting room, which is what it gets used as most of the time anyway, or a chapel in the future if we needed a smaller chapel space. The storage closet that's in there now that is shared by about 5 different things at the church would be dedicated specifically to social ministry storage. Okay. Yes. Oh, yeah. I always forget that part, but it is kind of cool. Go back. Okay, so going back to flexible space. So this would be the new wall into the new sanctuary. This wall is actually could be removed at some point if our congregation ever got to the place where we were filling up our 600-seat sanctuary rather than building a whole new sanctuary. We could remove this wall and move it back to where you see this dotted line, and it would give us the ability to add another 200 seats. Okay. Phase 2, lower level. So this would be our new expanded preschool and office space. What's exciting to me, and I think to the rest of the building committee and even church council about this proposed plan, is that this allows our church to grow in a way that we can really start doing more for the community. It makes the preschool, honestly, just that, a preschool. It doesn't have to be shared on Sundays. It doesn't have to be shared for VBS. It doesn't have to be shared with anybody that would want to come and have a morning time Bible study or a grief support group or an Alzheimer's support group or whatever you can possibly imagine. It could literally function as the preschool all the time and not have to be disturbed, and it would allow the members of our church to form the different groups and support groups and Bible study groups that we wanted to do and reach out into the community and be able to help pull them in and support them too. So this is a big overview of the proposed second phase, first floor. Classrooms, entrance over here, offices, and I'll go into detail on all this, bathrooms, more offices and storage. Okay, so this is actually a bump out, and I'll show it to you when we get to the elevations, but it would actually bump out that direction on our church, and it would expand the office space that's there now. And what that would do is it would allow us to have an entrance here where we could have our receptionist or church secretary. It would give all of the pastors their offices right up front. So as you can see, Pastor Ada's office, Vicar, and Pastor Schultz's office right here. It allows for an extra office. Again, if our church did grow to fill that sanctuary, the reality is we would probably need more called staff. It's got a storage closet, another extra office, and a conference room. This was the staff of the preschool and our called staff were very excited about the idea of having a conference room right where their offices were that would allow them to more easily have staff meetings without having to book it and go against everyone else that's trying to use our current conference room. I don't know if you guys are like me, but I've been down there several times and had somebody walk in and be like, oh, I thought I had this space. It's a little awkward. And then going out here, our copy room would remain where it is. Here would be the main preschool office. This would be John Blakely, our finance manager, or whoever is our finance manager in the future. This would be his new office. And this would be, and preschool staff was super excited by that, this would be a break room, a proper break room for our teachers that serve our children and the children of this community so wonderfully. So just so you kind of have a perspective on where this is the current Mother's Day out room. It would get divided in half, and it would become the finance manager's office and a break room with a small kitchenette for all of our teachers. Maybe I need an eye exam. I feel like I can't see up there. And then this would be preschool storage. Okay, so this would be our new Mother's Day out room. It's bigger than the one that they currently have. It keeps them in an area that can be locked down with the rest of the preschool, which our Mother's Day out staff was very excited about. This would be the preschool kitchen, which would allow us to offer full-day preschool, which we can't currently do. It would allow our preschool to be able to serve lunches. It is not a duplicate of the kitchen in the fellowship hall. It is not a commercial kitchen. The preschool was insistent that that was not necessary for the size our preschool would be. It is a residential-sized kitchen. The location was chosen primarily for access to an outside wall for venting and things like that. This is the existing furnace room. It would stay. This is currently labeled Sunday school offices, but could be changed. Janitorial room, new server room. I think that's everything on that one, right? Oh, and again, there's the exit to the fellowship hall. This is just a zoomed-in view of the classrooms. As you can see, they are larger than our current classrooms. They each have access to a bathroom and to the hall. And the hallways and the access and the doors were a lot of conversation and a lot of time. We wanted to make sure that everybody had good access to the rooms, could get in and out of them easily or in an emergency, but also were very easily locked down if necessary in the case of an emergency. This does give us 2 more classrooms than we currently have, which would allow us to expand our preschool. Anything else about preschool, Pastor Schultz, that I missed? Or Doug?
No, only that phase 2, because there's
Yes,
questions about
I think I know where you're going.
where phase 2 goes and what happens to the present preschool.
Correct. So part of the reason that the fellowship hall was made phase 1 from our original thought of sanctuary and preschool being phase 1 is that in order to do the expansion on the sanctuary and the preschool, it would not be usable for probably about a year, which left us in the place of figuring out where do we worship and where does our preschool go. So if we do the fellowship hall first, that solves both of those problems. The upstairs fellowship hall is large enough and has a perfect space where we could put an altar and worship on Sunday mornings while this was being expanded. And with the Sunday school classrooms downstairs, it gives Amy a great place to put the preschool. And even better, it's the same address, so she would not have to get, relicensed or anything like that. Our kids would not be leaving the property. We'd just be moving over a building. Makes her job and the jobs of our teachers way easier. There is everything they need in that fellowship hall building to be able to run the preschool for a year. We really, really, really did not want to have to shut down our preschool for a year or try to shift it somewhere else. That can be very detrimental to a preschool program. We knew we would lose a lot of families, would not be doing a service to our congregation or to our community. So by building the fellowship hall first, we have solved the problem of where do we worship and where does our preschool go. So it kind of worked out very well.
And some people have asked why don't we put the sanctuary over here to the north and then put the fellowship hall here, and it's really just a space issue.
Yeah.
We can put a bigger building to the north and
Correct.
a smaller building here to the west, and so fellowship hall needs to be the bigger building and sanctuary needs to be the smaller building, and so we're just kind of stuck with how we maximize the property.
Yeah, everything was done very purposefully, was thought out with the civil engineering company and with the architect, again, to make the best use of our existing building and our existing land and the space that we have and how we make the most of that, and do it the right way so that it can serve our congregation for a very long time to come. So these are the outside elevations of the building expansion. This is the west elevation, so if you're standing in our current parking lot, correct? Looking at the, oh, Black Bob. Yep, that's east. Directions, okay. So this is if you're standing on Black Bob and looking at the building. This is the existing building. Here is the bump out for the offices that I was talking about on the lower level of phase 1. This is the connectors, 2 floors of connectors, the hallways that go from phase 2 to phase 1 and back. This is the fellowship hall. There's the entrance on the lower level. Again, there would be parking out here. And then this is just the placeholder for proposed phase 3. Again, a big giant footprint of a box that we could or could not make whatever we want. Oh, and I don't know if you guys saw, but we did have permission. We can put a steeple if we would like. South, standing over there. So this is the south view of the building. Again, everything that's in gray is existing. Everything that's brown is new. So this is existing building, existing portico, and then this is all new. This would be the new office expansion that we talked about, lower level preschool, upper level sanctuary, and then another entrance from the new parking lot into that lower level. North, so looking from that direction. Again, this is the side of, this one right here would be the side of phase 3. This would be the side of the fellowship hall, correct? And then the entrance into the fellowship hall. This is our existing entrance into the sanctuary and narthex. East from our existing parking lot. Okay, I got it now. So this is our existing building. Bump out for offices, back of the fellowship hall, future phase 3 if we choose, connectors. Okay, that is it. Doug, you want to go over the financial piece?
Thank you. If we need to talk about the money piece, I guess we will. We can't just,
On the building question, are you saying that the fellowship hall will have a basketball court?
it will be large enough for a basketball court. I don't know if you want to,
So that would be up to congregation, I
Yeah,
suppose, as we're building, whether or not we put one in. Yes, the
Yes.
ceiling is more than tall enough for a basketball.
right.
So there was talk, if the congregation so desired, there could be the kind of basketball hoops, that drop down from the ceiling and have an imprint on the floor. Doesn't have to be there, but it is a possibility if we would like that for play space for the youth.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the point of, my daughter's asked, is it going to be a wood floor, or are we going to have baskets that come from the ceiling?
We are
and-
so far from
Yeah,
picking
it's like,
flooring and
we-
interiors and
yeah,
all that.
We don't know yet. So it will be big enough, and I think it would be nice to have goals set up in there, whether they're portable or whatever. But yes, Zach? Yes. That would be part of, that'd be part of phase 1 to connect phase 1 to our existing building. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, he asked if we could go back to the north elevation. Where is the canopy?
They
It's
didn't
not
put it on
there.
that one. It was
It's not going away.
yeah, it was accidentally omitted on this drawing. It's,
Yeah. It is there. It's not going anywhere. We are keeping it.
Right, it's shown on this elevation, but they omitted it on the north.
Yeah. Any other questions before we go into the financial? Pam?
Is just, speaking of the gym, the ceiling probably would not be high enough for like high school volleyball. That would be it will be a little shorter ceiling because of the overall elevation of the property and the restrictions by Olathe. It'll be plenty tall for playing around volleyball. It'll be
Right.
plenty tall for basketball, but it would be probably inadequate for competitive high school volleyball.
So the trustees wants to know, where's our building?
Where's what?
Okay, so the trustees want to know where is their building. So that would actually
Okay.
be part of phase 1. It would come in as part of the engineering work to do the parking lot, the removal and moving of the retention pond, the removing of the house, and they would eventually end up with their own garage built on the property to the north.
You had a lot of,
Doug is going.
you had a lot of slides. There
I
we go.
had a lot of slides.
It's on the
I don't think
northeast
they're my
corner
Right.
of,
Right there.
Right up there. So this, yeah, this would be the trustees building. I believe it's a 4-bay garage.
Yes. It would be part of phase 1.
Right.
So the city of
It'll-
Olathe and the city of Olathe Fire Department was very specific about this portion, meaning the parking lot and the retention basin and all of that must be done with phase 1, period, end of story, regardless of how we expand the sanctuary. Expanding the sanctuary to the size we want to, just required parking.
well, and it has to have, when we met with the city, the fire department didn't care about anything except that the end of the parking lot is big enough for a
turn
fire
around a
truck
fire
turnaround.
truck.
Yeah, they've got a deadhead here big enough
They
to
want to turn around to a fire truck and access to the buildings from the front if, heaven forbid, they needed to put ladders up and fire hoses and all of those
And
things.
access behind the building.
Correct.
So it has to have hose reach from the upper parking lot and from that lower parking lot to the back of those two
And that also
red bricks.
dictated some of the height of the building. They have to be able to reach the top with ladders. More than we need.
I believe we were adding, maybe on this drawing,
Not if we worship 1,000 people.
Dream big.
it says 292. So I think if I'm reading this correctly, 177 is what we have. We're going to 292, so 120 parking spots, give or take, in that lower level.
Did you have a question?
Is going to be setting on the property we have right now, the completion of phase 1 and phase 2. In other words, how much of the property we can see right now is going to be covered by those two buildings?
Okay, so I'll do my best to, maybe we can see it on the drawing here.
So if you didn't hear him, his question was, how much of our property will be taken up by phase 1 and phase 2?
Okay. So just for, if you looked out this window, you'll see the corner of the property where we mow, and that's approximately in here, right in that area.
That is also houses, those squares, by the way. That's how close
These
the
little
new
outlines,
development will be
yeah.
to our land.
That's why we thought it was important to get going on development. So, Bill, in answer to your question, it will be, I believe this was about 100 feet wide, maybe 120 feet wide, with about a 25-foot connector. So approximately, let's say 150 feet to the north. And that's all on the drawings. I mean, we could get exact measurements, but just off the top of my head, I'm guessing we would push it.
So where, looking at that picture right there, about where does the house and the garage sit right now?
They are sitting about right in here, I believe. Yeah, and they'll have to be removed. Council's working on that now. We're expecting that to be removed later this summer or this fall, the house and the garage, and then we'll start bringing in fill. And this, I say this is all based on congregation approving the plans and a capital campaign and so on. But that's what council is working towards.
It may take a little longer than that just because the city takes a while.
The permitting, yeah, we understand that the permitting to demo a house legally takes about 3 months. Yeah. I want to
Legally.
put that in there. We're trying to be lawful citizens.
We're trying to abide by all of the rules that the city of Olathe
Yeah,
has.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Mike?
Question for me, and hopefully everybody can hear me, is how many seats do we have right now, Pastor, here?
Just shy of 300, 280.
Okay, so we're building that way, correct?
Correct.
800 seats, so how far would that go?
It's about it's just a little bit bigger than what the current preschool is.
Well, I'm just trying, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to picture this with the sanctuary being added, parking lot, how close we're gonna be to the street itself.
No, it's almost the same footprint as the current preschool, a couple feet wider, north to south, but I think the length is almost the same because the playground will go back in the same spot. So the footprint towards the street will be about the same as it is now, and then the You can see the fellowship hall is about the same then. And then that third phase, just to give it frontage, front interest, is set back just a few feet. But that's the only reason phase 3 is set back a few feet, is just to break up the building and give it a little bit of interest, visual interest.
And if you want, go ahead.
Well, the playground will come out when we
Right.
build phase
Yeah,
2
put
and then
back.
go back in.
Right,
Correct.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's pretty close to being the same footprint as the current preschool.
And if you want to, I think you were asking Mike as well about the street. This is our existing sign right here. So that edge of the parking lot will be almost as far as the sign is to the west. Yes,
Some of that front hill will be graded down, and to get that, the parking lot has to be shaped like that because of the elevation difference between the street and the building up here is such an incredible difference in that they have to actually do a switchback kind
Yeah.
of a thing for the parking lot.
and these are retaining walls, actually. That's what our
That's what
civil
the civil
engineering.
engineer
That's
does.
the
Yeah. So
the
we have, yeah.
miracle of Phelps Engineering. But basically, everything that drains from up above will run behind the buildings and down the north side of the property.
We'll have to capture that, yes.
Well, a lot of the parking lot drainage is already into storm sewer.
Oh, they'll
Yeah,
have,
so
They have to do that, not us.
yeah.
That's on
And,
them.
and theirs is running the same direction. Theirs is
Correct.
running in between their property and our property on that north piece of the L. Theirs is gonna run,
It's up in
our
here, I believe.
engineer and their engineer is sculpting that land together, effectively.
Yeah. Yes, Ken?
Okay, are we gonna be keeping we're gonna be creating a new entrance and keeping the same entrance here, right?
Correct.
Because that looks like it's gonna be an awfully log jam, if coming people down, making a U-turn and going back out then to
Yes.
Black Bob Road. It's congested enough when you're leaving and people are coming in on Sunday mornings now, but to add
Right.
this curly Q in there is gonna be an awful, people backing out of their parking spots and coming out and making that U-turn and then heading out to Black Bob there.
Right. We'll have the existing entrance that we have now. We'll add this new one to the north, and then we've got an interconnect here as well. So we'll have 2 points of entry and exit. And I think, I mean, I will speak on for myself, but I think I'm still holding out hope that when the subdivision is built, we can work with them to get a cut through their property back there to connect to another street eventually. They have a,
Because supposedly the street that comes out of that subdivision headed south will actually someday cut all the way through. As soon as the piece of property to the south gets sold and developed, which may never happen if the family digs in on it, but if that ever gets sold and developed, that street, or the city will mandate that a street goes through anyway, but a street will go through, and so we're hoping that an entrance back there at the back will
Right.
become available.
they have, that property has I believe it's gas line that passes through there.
Correct.
And they can't build. And so they actually came to us when this all started back in 16, trying to work out different deals with trading land or us buying some of their property and them buying some of ours, and we never could come to an agreement on what we wanted versus what they wanted. But they have a piece of property that they can't build on, and we're hoping that maybe we could lease it, buy it, whatever, to get a cut through to that street eventually. Yeah. Yes.
The only issue I see with that, and if
Lisa.
you have Aldersgate down at 151st, and Black Bob as an example, everybody uses your parking lot as a street, and we will have to maintain the parking lot and repave it more often.
Yeah.
That's the only
So
downside to
there-
that.
Yeah, then there's a lot to happen there as far as the street and access and acquiring that property. Right now, I believe that they have a full-size lot that we would have to connect or go through to connect to any future street.
No, we've definitely thought of that though,
Yeah.
Lisa, and that's, You know, but even if we have it gated, except for Sunday morning, that still might be really nice. If you can go out that,
Right.
that and get over to Flum, I mean, what a great access. Right. No, we've definitely thought
We've
about
talked
that.
Yeah. Yep.
It's actually why when we did the parking lot expansion, we didn't do a straight shot. If you look at that parking lot expansion, we could have done a straight shot right up the driveway and kind of fixed the curving around that you have to do. And Judd at the time recommended that we didn't do that because of that issue in the future. People will be less likely to cut through if it's inconvenient. They'll be less likely to cut through if we put a gate on it.
For
Things
those
like
of you-
that.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Judd Clausen is a member here, but he's also an engineer with PEI, the civil engineering firm that's doing all of our civil work. So he has not just codes and such in mind, but also the best interest of our congregation in mind.
Just a timing question. So I heard that the preschool playground would be moved temporarily while construction was happening during, like, so when Phase 2 was being built.
Correct.
So where does that playground go during that time? Because we're talking about at least a year of construction probably for that. So where would the preschool children play?
Yeah, that's been something that we have discussed, and it's a need. We have not gotten that one completely figured out yet because, I mean, there's talk about making this a nice area, but there would be construction going on, this close. So the thought was perhaps their playground is out here
That's probably
because
the
they would be
best.
housed in this area anyway.
The best spot would be to the north. It'll just take longer for the kids to walk there.
Right.
But we'll also have a gym
That's
that they
true.
can play in.
Yes, Charlotte?
I work with missions and with fellowship, so that's what I like. The first is a short question. I know the bathrooms will have the toilets and they'll be paid for. The things in the kitchen, like the commercial freezer, refrigerator, is that all in the cost also?
It will be. That will all be in the finance cost of part of the project itself. Yeah, we won't delay on finishing out the kitchen till later. It will be part of the construction.
Since we're expanding the fellowship area and I work with missions, I'm hoping in the future that we can actually use that space a lot. And I would like to maybe provide meals for the community, sometime, or, I mean, I could probably make a list of different things we could use the fellowship hall for. But I was wondering also if it would become a emergency area, like if there was ever anything in the community that we would need to, maybe provide a space for people.
Right.
So this is a weird part. Would we be able to add a shower or two in the area just in case we would need that type of thing? Is there a space for it?
You want to respond? You have a thought, Eric?
Yeah, hi, I'm Eric Olson. I am related to her by marriage. Yeah, well, no. That's hurtful. He asked if I was her father-in-law. That's fantastic. With the tornado that just occurred, and I've done some other, I've got family down in Florida, and they have opened up their gym space, but what they do is they rent showers. They just bring in the trailer showers, and that gives a way for people to take showers without having to keep that on property full-time for the what if. They can be rented. They're pretty reasonable.
And also you run into all kinds of problems if they're not anymore. You almost have to have a single stall lockable door kind of a shower situation, and those just take a lot more maintenance and cleaning and upkeep. And
But also, this is what got the building committee and I think the facilities planning committee and council so excited, was just this. People that have a heart for service, which I feel like everybody in our church does, The addition of this fellowship hall gives us so many ways to serve the community and serve each other and do these things that we are just so limited right now. We wouldn't be limited by space anymore. We could set up a shelter if, heaven forbid, we had a tornado like they did just a few weeks back, or if somebody in our congregation was getting married and wanted to have their reception at our church, we would now be able to do that. It just opens it up for you all to serve any way you would like.
Great, thank you.
So is there any thought or discussion given to the distance between the sanctuary and the altar room? As somebody who carries wine back and forth, it's quite a distance now. and we're
Marcy, that's
doubling
why
it.
I bought you a cart.
So believe it or not, that was actually a topic of discussion on more than one occasion. And here's the thing, when you go bigger, there's just going to be more distances. So there was actually talk at some point of having you over in the fellowship hall, and we very quickly 86'd that. We acknowledge the fact that the current altar guild room, as our congregation grows, is just not going to be enough space. So the easiest solution to keep you as close as possible to the altar and still give you more space, more usable space, was to give you the old kitchen. And by you, I mean the altar guild, not Marcy specifically. And that just made the most sense. There is going to be more walking. It just kind of is what it is as you get bigger.
It's just a plumbing issue also.
Yeah.
Right, and
Sinks
sure,
and-
we could take part of this room, but then you have to run plumbing and all of that becomes more cost, whereas we have a really dynamite space with a lot of
Plumbing
space and
and
a lot of,
space and storage and
yeah.
Yeah, no, we did have a lot of conversation about it, and unfortunately, we can't put everything that we would want in the sanctuary. It just won't. It won't fit. And on time.
It's an awful tall order, I don't know. I don't know.
We'll need a clock with bigger hands, you
Just
can
don't
see.
know. No, but honestly, I mean, Altar Guild, I think I think there are ways to eventually think outside the box too. And I mean, maybe we just have more trays that are already filled for second service and everything is up front for both services, right? I mean, there are lots of different ways that we could probably skin the cat.
I saw
And that's always fun.
packaged communion online.
Yeah.
Please, Eric, please. All right.
Yes, Dave.
I'm going to pare my list back since tomorrow's a school day. All right. The extra storage will definitely get filled with all the seasonal items, of course, yes. But back on the storm topic and shelter.
Yes.
Is a FEMA-rated shelter being considered, possibly the youth room, being close to bathroom and kitchen for potentially the preschoolers? Because we know that that'll be the primary worry.
Right.
Because they're occupying this more than all of us who are congregants, minus the staff.
Right. Do you want me to take that, or do you want to take that one?
We did have conversation about a licensed technical tornado shelter. Yeah, that gets super pricey and there's really nowhere to put it. So in talking with the architect and the engineer, the closest place to put them was actually part of that building is underground. Doug, do you want to?
Yeah, would you want me to show?
The part that we decided would be the
I think
place
it
to go.
was- Yeah, I think it was actually by the youth room.
Yeah, so the majority of that youth room is underground. It backs up to,
It's built into
and
this
that would
building.
become our tornado shelter, although it would not technically be a FEMA-rated tornado shelter. That would be the safest place with the least windows and closest to underground and all of those.
It actually would make sense. We've talked about putting windows in that room. It actually might make sense not
To
to
not
put
to,
windows in that room
correct.
for future discussions
To leave 'em out
with the
here.
So
building
that
committee.
would be the place for preschoolers to go, or if it was a Sunday for us to go, or whatever.
And then,
Great idea.
I know you'll reach the point, hopefully, we can just go with the phase 1, 2 drawings and just drop the 3 since it is quite out in the future, so we get a real good idea. But just say the north area where the phase 3 would be, is the green space, seating and all landscaping included in the phase 1 as far as finishing off the building?
Yeah, all the civil work and everything that would need to be done per the city requirements, city codes would be in that phase 1.
Okay. The renderings we've seen on the elevation drawings
Yes.
of all 4 views, is that approved by the city as far as design and color?
No.
Or are they going to come back
well,
and make an issue?
The colors, I think, are appropriate, but the limitations and the time that they had at that time when they did it in November, the actual landscaping and everything around has not been designed or submitted to the city or any of that. And you'll notice, see if I can find that again, that's really not even a true representation of what the parking lot would look like.
But we did have to.
That was a better view of the
Right.
overall property from an earlier question.
Right, right.
It is based off of the city guidelines, though, because we did have to go in to the city to get permitted for this, to get it put on the city books and do a certain percentage of the building has to be windows, a certain percentage of the building has to be that. It can't be this on the outside, it can't be that on the outside. So we did go through all of that, so that is a representation of what the city would allow.
Right.
Part of the final drawings for civil and for architectural are going to include landscaping plans that the
Correct.
city will have to sign off on.
Correct.
Correct,
So
But that
we'll
has not
have
been done
those.
at this time. Yeah.
correct.
That is the small part of this expansion. That is the probably $30,000 part of this $4 million expansion.
Well, I'll let you stand by that number. So.
Okay, any more questions? Yes,
I-
Fred.
From a timing standpoint, so when we think about phase 1, so phase 1 is fellowship hall, classrooms, but initially it's staging for preschool classrooms for preparing for their expansion.
Correct.
So I guess the question from a timing standpoint, so if the connectors are basically outside this window to the right, then during phase 1 construction, how much disruption will there be in the sanctuary during that construction, and how much will it impact our worship space for during that construction timeline? Because I think that's kind of hard to understand. Like, well, just from a timing standpoint of where will we go and when and all of that.
Right. So phase 1, when we build it, it will go right through that wall. So we can keep that sealed off as long as possible, as is, while we build out there. And there'll be some point where we have to open it up. We can still close it off with plastic or whatever until it's done, but we will lose, I would guess, a significant amount of that section at that time.
But the actual bridge can all be done on the outside.
Right.
Because there'll be new steel pillars that go down right along the foundation, the present foundation. And so everything can be done and then opened up, hopefully within like a week.
Yeah, I
Right,
would,
open it up, have church, finish it
right.
off,
There may be a
kind of
couple
thing.
Sundays where we have plastic up or something.
I think it'll
while
be
they're-
very, very limited intrusion of the actual construction into this area. That was a great question.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, I have several questions, and Eric said to go ahead and ask them. Coat closet for the fellowship hall. I know we still have the coat closet here, but if we're going to have large events over there, such as wedding receptions, I didn't see one in the drawings.
So part of the fellowship hall that is not super detailed, and again, these drawings are as detailed as we could get without actually going to the next level, which is construction phase drawings, which Doug will talk to you about in the financial piece of why we stopped there. But there is a lot of storage built in right next to the kitchen, 2 big areas next to the front doors also. And so we did talk about any one of those could house coats. We definitely will need coat storage over there. We did talk with the architect about how much space tables and chairs would take up, and he actually went as far as to go online and pull up tables that we would purchase and chairs and look at the dimensions and look at what they would be stored on. And his thought process after he did all that was we could actually get all of the tables and chairs into one of those front storage closets, which would leave another one open for coats or whatever. You have the space, you tend to fill it, right?
Right.
So we would have space.
Okay, next question. We have a beautiful stained glass window, and we're obviously going to get rid of this wall. And I know that the new front wall will have like a false backing for the sun does not shine in for evening services. So are we keeping this one, or where's it going?
So I'm going to let Pastor Schultz answer that. We will be keeping it, but it will be moving.
Yeah, so probably either on the north side or the south side, closer to the front. So like in the front third, there's a big window marked in there, Doug.
You're talking about right there?
Keep going a little further down. Oh,
Or this way?
maybe it is that black section. I was thinking it's the white section. It's the black section, I guess. Somewhere in there, probably cheated towards the front a little bit more than it is currently, will be that window. And then I heard that the circles were going to buy another one for the north side to put in kind of, or, no, that's tongue-in-cheek, obviously. But I mean, that would be kind of a cool vision, is to keep the Trinitarian window, do some cool artwork on like kind of a stone wall in front maybe, and then another cool stained glass window. I don't know. 1,000 things we could choose from, Jesus and the children, or I don't know what.
We can talk if Mark wins the lottery. He keeps playing, and he has brilliant ideas, so.
There you go. Don't worry. If anybody wins the lottery, you come talk to me. Come talk to me first.
Okay, sorry, I've got 2 more questions. Pipe organ, because I know that we're going to be moving that way.
Yep.
Pipe organ's all the way back here. Obviously, that probably needs to be relocated.
So that was also a big topic of discussion. I am going to let Pastor Schultz take that because I am not anywhere in any vicinity of musical knowledge whatsoever.
Yes, so the pipe organ will definitely go into the new space. The pipe organ may be actually kind of small for the new space. I don't know. We may have to add a few ranks. So
But there is room for it, if that's what you're asking.
When we start talking, so here's kind of the deal, folks. If our capital campaign raises $4.5 million, I think church council is going to say, well, let's do phase 1 and then phase 2 back to back. If we don't raise $4.5 million, which I don't think is going to happen, but you never know, right? You never know. I'm not going to limit God.
Mark
But if
might
we-
win the lottery.
That's exactly right. If we only raise $1.5 million or $2 million in the capital campaign, then phase 2 is a little bit further down the road, hopefully not too far down the road, or we may be worshiping in the fellowship hall again, kind of like the original congregation did for a lot of years, right? But I'm really hoping that wouldn't even be for a lot of years, right? And then phase 2. When we get closer to phase 2, the organ becomes a definite topic of discussion with Reuters Organ Company on where to install, how much bigger. Maybe needs to be bigger. Maybe at that point we add some what are called reeds. Reeds would give like flute sounds and trumpet sounds and things like that. Reed pipes give kind of instrument sounds to your organ. You know, maybe we do something and add some reed pipes at that time. I don't know, but definitely will be something to be discussed.
But to basically answer your question, for where we are at now, there is room for it. There is room for it to be bigger, and it will be part of the plan.
Or Reuters says sell it, and we have a better option for you.
Okay, yeah, I just was concerned with the potentially removable walls, so that was all right, my last question. If we have wedding events at the new fellowship hall, are we going to be able to have alcohol?
That has been informally addressed with the Board of Elders, and it will be going on an agenda this summer to discuss.
Okay, more questions? Fred, okay.
One of the things that I'm really excited about is the additional classrooms, especially, and also the concept of the preschool is the preschool, and we're not going to have this dual use and But one of our current dual use spaces is used every Sunday during the education hour, the nursery. So has there been any consideration where that nursery space will be during education hour? I don't really remember seeing it called out on any of the drawings.
Great question. I don't know that, I know we talked about it. My memory is fuzzy. It's been a year.
I mean, the simple fix to that, Fred, would be to make the cry room large enough to be that space.
No.
But I don't know.
Carrie Schleff was also on the building committee, and she was all over this kind of stuff. So do you remember what we discussed? Oh, yeah, we did. We talked about the Mother's Day out room. It is, but it's in the front part. It's not anywhere near the classrooms, and it's on the connector, right next to the connector bridge. So it's where the conference room and library are downstairs right now.
And we always want to remember, there is no church and preschool versus church. It's all church space.
It is.
Well,
but
and
and
that's
if we-
that's really important. None of it is preschool space. It's all church space, which is used for the preschool, and we're going to be fortunate enough to basically always use it as dedicated preschool space. I think that language is very important and really keeps any kind of strife from happening. When I first came here, there was a big push by a few members to charge the preschool for electrical, heating and cooling, cleaning. That's silly. Preschool is a ministry of the congregation. The space belongs to the congregation. The preschool is not a separate identity or entity. It's Beautiful Savior Lutheran Preschool. So we always want to remember that. And even if we end up sharing some spaces in the future, we share spaces in the future and it's all good.
So the other thing too, and the reason that I don't know if anyone caught it, but when we were looking at where the preschool is currently in that expansion of phase 2 lower level, and I said this is labeled currently as the Sunday school room, we realized after we labeled it and had the architect label it that it would actually not make sense to have the Sunday school office down there anymore. It needs to be over in the fellowship hall with the Sunday school. But the good part about this is, and I'm going to keep going back to this, it is a lot more space than we currently have, and it's very flexible use. So there is nothing that says any one of those 8 classrooms couldn't be a nursery once phase 2 is completed. Any more questions?
I have several. Some of them are construction, some of them are just philosophy, I guess. Has the planning committee projected or extrapolated the future congregation size? I mean, it's grown significantly since I've been here, but
Right.
how did you come up with whatever size you want going with?
Right. It was initially, yeah, to Pastor's point, it was.
If we end up worshiping 1,400 people on a Sunday morning, that'll max us out.
Well, I was more concerned the other way.
If we don't grow?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're building a lot, it's gonna cost a lot to build this, and it's gonna cost even more to heat and cool it. So
Right.
just wanted-
Yeah, those things have been discussed. I mean, we have,
Just my own edification, the approval that you got from the city, what was that? Was that just a planning document?
It's just a placeholder so that we could build these.
So you have to have construction approval later on?
correct. We don't have construction drawings or permit drawings yet.
But with everything that's been done, construction approval goes a lot faster.
Right.
Once
so-
we take construction documents to them, because they've already okayed the building in principle, the construction documents are very simple to get through the city.
Right, so we took this again as far as we could with the city so that we're not going to run into anything from our new neighbors over here to make the best use of our land for the congregation, whether it gets built now or if it gets built in 10 years. But we did stop at the construction drawing process. I'm sure it does. Does it have a specific name?
What we did with
What
the
we
city.
put on file with the city?
Oh, yes, that's a Judd Clausing question. He knows all of
It has a
the
fancy name that basically means we have a
fancy
placeholder.
words.
Okay.
Okay, Third one is, did the planning commission look at other churches of our size about what their space needs are? Or we going on our own or whatever? The reason I ask that is the fellowship hall looks extremely large to me. And with all the offices, I just wondered who we're going to put in those offices.
Well, I think some of the offices, if we did grow, to Danny's point earlier, if we did grow, we would have more staff. But the other piece, the number of offices had to do with, right now, Lead a Child has an office in the house. And so by having other offices in the space, it would allow us to also provide a space for other LCMS organizations to office here should they need to, like Lead a Child.
'Cause you keep talking about these congregational dinners, but I don't recall that many that we've had that many people attend, so I'm just curious.
Right. We have not. I don't know the exact numbers.
I don't want to be a naysayer, but.
No, we were planning for growth. To Pastor's point or to Danny's point, we were planning when we started out with this, how big can we go based on our space and what the city would allow?
Right.
And we worked with an architect. We did not contact other churches, I will say that, but we did hire an architect who had extensive church design. They have great experience in designing churches. So that's a lot of what we leaned on in how we sized things and how many classrooms and so on.
And
Pastor, do you have
we also don't have a lot of full congregational meals. We can't. And I don't know if you guys know, but that high school to rent is not inexpensive. It is super pricey. And I don't know if you guys know, but the fellowship budget with what we do for the congregation around here is like itty bitty compared to pretty much any other board that's here. And we stretch it as far as we can. But there has even been talk in recent times when we've had other events in the narthex that are not full congregation things. Advent by candlelight, for one, we barely fit. I mean, we are knocking things over. We don't fit. When we had Seder, I mean, we were talking about, do we need to cap attendance? Do we need to say, once we have this many people RSVP'd, we can't take any more? And that shouldn't happen in a church. Yes.
So a couple of observations. St. Matthew's, Lee Summit, where Pastor Otto is that right? Trenton, is that who did the capital campaign when we were doing ours? Yeah. Yeah, so St. Matthew's worships about what we worship, and they built a fellowship hall about the same size as ours. Theirs is a single floor, so they don't have classrooms underneath because they have classrooms other places, and I believe they don't have a preschool. So the need is a little bit different, but they built about the same size fellowship. The other observation that I would make, because we talked about this with the architect quite a bit too, we arguably need a building about 2/3 that size and a building that we could add on to later. Because of our land, because of use of the land, and because of connecting it to this building, we can't build the front 2/3 and add onto the back later. And we can't build the back 2/3 and add onto the front later because that would cost a tremendous amount of money to redo the facade. So I don't want to say we're stuck building this building, but it's the building that kind of is laid in front of us for a whole bunch of really interesting reasons. And I really honestly, yes, we're going to have a lot of events in that fellowship hall that will seem small because it's a big space. I don't think that we'll be sorry for that because, as Charlotte said, there are lots of things that we can multiply in terms of ministry here that I think you'll be blown away at how we end up using that fellowship hall. We'll fill it for VBS. We'll fill it on Family Fun Day. We will fill it for a wedding. We will fill it for, right, we will fill that space several times a year. And that's just a couple that I can think of.
Okay, last question is the 25-foot space between the new and the old, is that just for construction access for the new facility? Or is there another reason?
I don't know that there's another reason. I don't think there's any magic to that number. It was just for construction and then actual, I guess, separation for.
Didn't it have to be so much space too for city fire.
I think there was a mandated separation. I don't know how much that was. I think there's also an elevation issue that actually drops in elevation by about 8 feet.
It does.
So the bottom floor will actually have a ramp that goes down. The top floor that connects will be straight across from this level to the fellowship hall. But the bottom floor will actually drop by, I believe it's 8 feet.
I don't even think it was I don't even
It's
think
not
so.
quite
I mean,
that much.
it's an unbelievable number.
Right.
That seems really crazy, but it was significant.
Correct, yeah. And that 25 feet for that ramp would give it the space that you're not at, like a big incline for
Right.
different types of people,
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
abled people.
Question back to Phil?
I'll start this with, I always have been brought up that a church should go massively in debt, that a church should stretch itself to the glory of God as much as they possibly can, and then some. I know that there's a certain amount of trust we have to have in God, but you keep saying if we grow. If we build this, we have to grow.
Correct.
Otherwise, we can't afford it. What's the plan to grow?
Yes.
But
Trenton-
what's the plan?
Trenton
Is there a
may-
written plan that we know how we're going to fill a 600-seat sanctuary?
So I can address some of that, and not necessarily as the chair of the evangelism board. Part of my job is I look at demographics, and specifically Kansas City demographics, but a lot of the Midwest. And this is a growing area, right? So expanding our plant, for the lack of a better word, just in and of itself is going to bring instantly. We'll see our congregation, conservatively increase in the 15 to 20% range. I have a lot of confidence in that.
Where do you get that from? Have you seen that? Does the Senate have a record of build it and they will come?
No, I just know based upon the economics of Kansas City, there are people moving here in exponential numbers. And we can, stay this certain size, and we'll stay this certain size. Or we can grow and adapt to the jobs, to the people that will be moving here over, depending on what reports you read, right? Over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
There are companies right now in California on the coast that are waiting for infrastructure to be built, and not waiting for us to expand, obviously, but waiting for communities like Olathe, waiting for communities here in Kansas City to improve their infrastructure so they can come here and set up, HQ2s or HQ1s for that matter. Because we have the labor pool, we just don't have the infrastructure. And in cities such as Olathe, Lenexa, cities on the Missouri side are preparing for that now. I mean, if you look at Lenexa is banking on that, and Olathe isn't that far behind. But just from the people that will be coming into the Kansas City area over the next decade, I have no doubt that our congregation will be growing, and that's with doing nothing, right? So as we develop these plans, as these become real, yeah, absolutely, we need to change our evangelism and assimilation strategy. We need to develop.
Right now, we don't have a plan to grow to this church size, because we're looking at being the biggest church in Kansas with the size of the sanctuary.
Okay.
If you look at the numbers, we've got 1,000 worshiping. The Methodist church out there? No, Lutheran, I'm sorry, largest Lutheran.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you look at a church that worships 1,600, 1,500, that means, no, they're smaller than we are now. They worship fewer than we do. That's a church, if you worship 1,500, that means your membership's 3,000. If you're a normal Lutheran church, that would be the biggest church in Kansas, it would be the Lutheran church. It would be the biggest Lutheran church in Kansas City. Bethany worships about 500 now. If you look
So, and I think that that's definitely a fair point. But I think that we,
And I'm in favor of it.
yeah,
Don't get me wrong, but we need to not just build it and hope they would come.
there are people in this community that are, searching for Jesus right now, right? And they're going to, and I want to throw Church of the Resurrection. They're going to other churches like that. And just because we're LCMS doesn't mean that we aren't going to attract people that aren't in the LCMS congregation now, or aren't in an LCMS congregation now. And I think we need to look beyond that, right? I think we need to look beyond, are we going to be the largest, are there other LCMS congregations in the Kansas City area this size? I don't know, but I think we need to, not only tell people about Jesus first and foremost, but I think we have a great opportunity to tell people about just LCMS in general.
I also just want to say, you said it wouldn't be normal. I would just like for you to know, and I've had several conversations with the staff here at Beautiful Savior, what our church is doing now is not normal for an LCMS church. The growth that we have had, the involvement that we have, the congregation that we have, it is not normal. I will fully own that. I'm sorry?
What has the growth been over the last 5 years?
Do you know, Pastor Schultz?
Probably 50
Probably
or
about-
more in worship every Sunday, and probably 80 more in Bible class
I put a
on a
chart
Sunday.
together.
We're up to about 60% of worshipers are in Sunday school and Bible class on any given
I had
Sunday.
another one.
I don't know a congregation that does that. I think we do a lot of things well, and I think we have visitors that come every Sunday. And honestly, if you're an 8 o'clock church goer, you would rather not have any visitors show up on any given Sunday, because they might actually take your space, let alone a member taking your space. I know it's a big deal, but we're full, and church research gurus would say, and it's pretty proven out that when you reach 80% capacity, you stop growing. We're over 80% capacity on any given Sunday. So
And so is our preschool. And
yeah,
so-
so it's hard to say. I know what
and-
you're saying, Phil, about a plan. So, some evangelism tidbits. God causes growth, not us. But what do we do to reach out? Carrie Schleff, she had her hand up a minute ago, but I'm going to steal her thunder. She just texted me. I don't know, I guess she was bored with all your questions. But she just texted me a VBS update. And what did you have on there? 68 of the 200 kids? 90.
229 kids registered. 96 of those kids either they didn't have a church home or they left the question blank.
Yeah, that's
Did you
the
hear
number
that?
I was looking for.
Did you hear her?
96 and 220 kids of VBS didn't have a church home or didn't write down a church home. So, we're making impacts. We're making impacts with preschool. I think we make impacts with some of the other things that we do here.
MOPS, Mother's Day Out.
We have a Mother's Day Out program. There's a lot of ways that we engage our community around us. I think there's a lot more ways that we can engage our community around us. And I think a fellowship hall will assist us in engaging in caring and outreach kinds of tasks. So, yeah, I know what you're saying, Phil, a plan. What's the plan? I don't know. I've never I don't know. Some pastors are really big on evangelism plans, and some kind of just work at engaging the people around us. I guess I've always been more of the how are we engaging people around us next? How am I getting my members to engage people around us? And I think that's a lot of what the evangelism committee or board looks at doing also. So I agree with you, though. I mean, we need to, and if we build a fellowship hall, right, we need to look at ways that expands, right? Open our eyes to what else? It's not a good answer, sorry.
She said, Danny, and you said that's not a good answer?
Holding that in forever, Danny, sorry. Just came out.
I'm really hurt. Anyway, I would like to praise you, Pastor, for something that you said during your devotion. Psalm 127, verse 1. That's the issue here with regards to whether or not we grow, because it's looking to the Lord for what we're doing. Trenton, I had evangelism board before we went to Guatemala. I remember Pastor you and Pastor Addis sitting in a meeting. This was right after I started. And you asked me to add $10,000 to the budget next year to form an adult mission. And my response was, if we pray and it's God's will, it will happen. There were prayers. The next month we came back, we had $10,400 before next year's budget. The planning started the next month after the request. Our mission statement that we work with is bringing people to Jesus as we gather, grow, and go. The focus is on Christ. As long as our focus is, I've been in a lot of different churches. The churches grow as long as the focus is on Christ and our faith grows and we seek His guidance. We will grow. I'm not worried about that as long as we keep our focus on Christ. That's my concern. And we have two great pastors that'll help us keep that focus. And we have a lot of members here that have that focus. We have a footprint designed here that's not in place, and what you're seeing here will not be what we end up with. What we end up with, hopefully, will be whatever God leads us to build for the missions that He's going to lead us to develop. There are a number of things we could be doing, but we can't right now, at least not very well, because we don't have this. And I remember coming here initially after starting a different program in another church. We don't have the facility to do the things that we were doing there. And that fellowship hall would make all the difference in the world to make those things happen. And that would be a weekly event there. I'm getting old. I'm not as energetic as I used to be, but those kinds of things can happen. They still do with the guidance and God's will in our hearts and looking to Him in whatever we do. One thing I would ask is that as we go forward, the board that's doing this, you continue to do this type of thing. Or set up something where the people that are doing missions or wanting to be involved with something, they have a way of telling you what their needs are in order to do the Lord's work. That's all.
Thanks, Danny. You actually said that more eloquently than I was able to. I appreciate that. I'd like to, I'll share this story with you because I think it's kind of interesting. So I was here about 9 months. I've been here 10 years. I was here for 9 months. And when I was called here, the call committee, I don't know, they baited and switched me or something. Something went wrong because Doug Munkin was on the call committee, and the call committee was like, yes, we're ready to step forward.
I'll own it.
Huh?
I said I was chair, so I'll own that.
You were chair. We're ready to step forward and reach out and grow and do the next thing in mission and ministry. And I was here about 9 months, and we did a kind of a mission and ministry retreat on a Saturday, an all-day Saturday kind of a thing. And during that, one of the original members who's no longer here came up to me and said, "You know, Pastor, I think this congregation is about the right size." How sad. Only if the Lord wants it to be the right size. Only if the Lord wants it to be the right size. So I've never been in favor of limiting God, and I think for 10 years, honestly, with a lot of prayer and consideration and growth in programs and mission and ministry kinds of stuff, I think the Lord's been leading us in this direction. I think it's turned out with phase 1 and phase 2 being like it is because of some spectacular guiding by the Holy Spirit with a bunch of spectacular people at our congregation. And I don't know, I'm terrified of the whole thing. But I was terrified when we did the $1 million edition, and God worked that out splendidly. We had that paid off in 3 years. Paid off. And there were a lot of people worried about it. We had some cost overruns, and people were, sky is falling mentality. And, it was what we needed to do at the time, and the Lord took care of it. And I think if the congregation is led to say this is what is needed, the Lord's going to take care of it, and the Lord's going to take care of growth if He wants us to grow as we have our eyes open. Right? So yes, we need to plan for what we're doing in terms of mission ministry. I feel like I'm doing that all the time. And there's other boards. Do I have a written down plan? No, but I think we do that all the time, looking at what we do and how we do it. And so I think the Lord's going to do that.
I think all the boards do that in council. We're always thinking about it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not condemning you at all. I got you.
Great discussion topics.
No, it was a great question, honestly.
But Paul knew where he was going when he got out and left the house. He didn't just say, "We'll see what the Lord takes him today." He knew where
Agreed. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, over the course of 10 years, that's been a daily thing for me and the boards that I work with.
Yeah, and I can speak
Most
for-
definitely.
I know trustees has got a list. I know fellowship board has a list. I'm sure everybody does of things that we would like to do,
Right.
but are limited.
Doug, you need to finish.
I need to finish. I'm sorry. Yes.
We have weekly prayers in our church. In the bulletin every week we have Guatemala. And we should add this, I think, to our weekly prayers for the congregation as we look ahead to have the congregation praying about this.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Pastor, I guess.
I'll let one of you remind me to add it, because...
All right.
Doug,
All right.
you're the responsible adult.
All right. So with that, I would like,
Right.
we have,
Before everybody leaves, you need to finish.
yeah, so we have about 11 slides to go through on the finances. All right, so to date, this is what we've done to date. As I said, we've done preliminary drawings. For the 2018 budget, council allocated $24,000 in the capital improvement fund for the purpose of these drawings. That amount was approved not only in the budget, but then the drawings, proceeding with the drawings themselves, was approved in 2018 at an April special voters meeting. What we spent of that, we spent $9,600 on the architect, a little over $16,000 on the civil engineer, for a grand total of just under $26,000. So that delta between the $24,000 and what we actually spent came out of Missions Forward Fund. That fund was set up years ago for the purpose of expanding our facilities, whether in a church plant or expansion of this property here. So the detailed drawings, in November of 2018, as I said, the congregation approved council to spend up to 90% of the 2018 budget surplus. At that time, we estimated that that budget surplus would be around $150,000 for a round number. And so we kind of had in our head what that might be. Well, where we ended up was significantly more. We ended up at a surplus of $260,000. So council reconvened, and in January we decided that we really don't want to spend that much. And as you may remember, we gave a tremendous amount of those funds away to other LCMS organizations and institutions of education. We limited ourselves to the $148,411. What we have spent to date, the drawings that we've been looking at, have cost us $3,350 for those drawings. So we're talking about how much detail. There's much more to be done, and we'll talk about just a second here how much it's going to cost us moving forward. But there are a lot of things still to figure out, and we've only spent $3,350 so far. So what we need to do moving forward, so phase one, that's the fellowship hall. That's what I really want to focus on now, because phase two will be after phase one, obviously, and will be largely dependent upon how we do in a capital campaign. The architectural engineering construction drawings, the ones that we were talking about a little bit ago that would allow us to actually get permits and go to construction, the quote for that is $85,000 for phase one. We have a quote for the geotechnical engineering of just under $6,000. The civil engineering that we talked a little bit about earlier, with all of that work to be done, we estimate, we don't have a quote on this one yet, we estimate it's around $25,000. That may change, but that's where we think it'll be. And then the LCF Labors for Christ, Lutheran Church Extension Fund Labors for Christ, and we'll talk more about those, that number here in a minute, but that's pre-construction services from Labors for Christ. So what council would be looking for now, the approval from congregation, not now, but in July, at the July 7th meeting, approval to spend that $127,000 to get to the point where we could actually start getting contractor bids and getting ready to actually break ground. The estimated construction cost, again, phase one is where we primarily focused. We estimate it's going to be around $3.9 million. That is not, there are no quotes in that. We haven't gone out to any subcontractors. We haven't gotten any firm numbers from anyone. That is an estimate from the architect based on their experience and what they've seen in the industry. Phase two for the sanctuary, the similar thing, $2 million, similar thing as far as how we got the number. And then the gymnasium, we have $1 million for that. If we decided to build a two-story classroom, that number would obviously go up. It would be more expensive than just a two-story shell to house a gym. So how do we fund that? Again, let's think about phase one, the $3.9 million. LCEF, again, Lutheran Church Extension Fund, did our last capital campaign for the narthex expansion. They estimate, based on our congregation size and what our giving is, that we could raise between $1.5 and $2 million in a 3-year capital campaign. We, as a council, have talked to LCEF. We think a good time to start would be in September of this year. Their campaign, actual solicitation, if you will, education and solicitation, runs 16 weeks. So if we start in September, that would allow us to start receiving the donations in January with the idea of breaking ground on phase one, like March, April timeframe. The cost to work with LCEF is $52,250. We feel like that's a very reasonable number considering what the return would be. 10% of that would be due when we sign up with them. So if we do receive approval in July from the voters, we would issue them a check for $5,250 to move forward with that. And then the balance is broken out as the campaign proceeds, with the remaining portion, 40%, I believe, is the last payment due when we actually start receiving funds. So let's say January. The difference between what we actually raise in our capital campaign, or what we get commitments for in a capital campaign, and what we need to build the building would be funded, could be funded through an LCEF mortgage. They currently hold our mortgage now. I believe they've held it for quite some time. We also have CDs with LCEF. So basically, it's an institution we feel that is reputable and fair. They are an LCMS organization, and we've had great experiences with them in previous mortgage. The actual construction, we have spoken with, I say we, council and the building committee have spoken with the LCF Laborers for Christ about actually doing our building. For those of you who are not familiar with them, it is a force of retired Christians that go around the country. They live in their RVs, and it doesn't seem as haphazard as I just made it sound, but they live in their RVs while they build the project. So basically you have retirees from the trades, from the industry, that work through a corporate headquarters. They are a subsidiary of LCEF, and they come to, for example here, they would come to Olathe, they would stay at a local RV park, come to our site, build Tuesday through Saturday, and then they go back to their park in the evenings and weekends. They have been around a while. They did my home congregation when I was in, I guess, early college. They've been around for 38 years and done over 900 projects. In all fairness, they said this would be one of their larger projects that they've done. They felt certainly capable, but it would be one of their larger projects. Their workers, the people that we talked about that would stay in their RVs, they're paid minimum wage. And so that's where we get this big savings at the bottom of the screen of 10 to 30%. They pay the people that hang the sheetrock, that would paint or lay out carpet or whatever other trades they can bring to us minimum wage, rather than somebody making $25 or $30 an hour as a general contractor or subcontractor in the community. The other piece of this is they do lead our congregational members. They actually become employees of the church, and then they lead teams in actual construction. And I said Tuesday through Saturday, they would be looking for help, let's say on a Saturday, to paint or to do whatever other unskilled labor may be needed on the Saturday, on the weekend. And the other piece of their savings comes in that they can procure and administer subcontracts. We don't have to hire a general contractor that would basically take a subcontractor's purchased material that's been marked up, and then they mark it up, and then they sell it to us. They'd be purchasing direct as much as possible. So working with Laborers for Christ, the $11,100 I talked about earlier for pre-construction services, they actually have a team of people that will work with the architect and the engineers to design the building to be constructed as efficiently and cost effectively as possible. So they would work with us in these final design phases, the $85,000 I'd mentioned earlier for architectural and engineering drawings. They would work with them to make sure that it is designed in a manner that can be constructed most efficiently. Council and the building committee, I think, feels pretty strongly that that would be a valuable service moving forward. Agreement 2 is the actual construction. The $122,700 is based on a $3 million build. They are basing it on $3 million because they believe if the architect thinks it's $3.9 million, they think when they build it, it could be closer to 3 at the best case, let's say. They do charge 4% administrative fees for anything that would come through the door as far as costs. So they don't put higher markups on it. They don't put higher margins. It's just 4% to basically fund their offices. And then their project manager gets paid a more reasonable wage for the trades. So let's say their project manager may make $30 an hour. That is in that $122,700, their estimates for project management. And then, as I said, the labor, the actual minimum wage out per hour people, they don't give us a quote on that. They look at the drawings, they give us an estimate. It does have a contingency in it, but they don't quote that simply because they don't feel like they can nail it down that tightly. And what they came back with and what council felt was if they're off, let's say 100 hours at $8 an hour, it's $800. It's not a tremendous amount of money like we might run into with a general contractor or a subcontractor. So then moving forward, what we as council would ask is that we hold a voters meeting July 7th where we would request from the voters assembly an overall approval for phase 1, where we would get approval to proceed with LCF for the capital campaign and move forward with Laborers for Christ for the construction and basically an overall approval of the construction drawings. At this point, council and the building committee, and Danny was touching on this earlier, we're at a point where we have the money to proceed with the drawings, but it became quite apparent that it would be unwise for council and the building committee to proceed with spending $125,000 if the congregation wasn't ready yet, if the congregation would not approve a capital campaign. So that's the reason for these forums and for the voters meeting July 7th. And then the last two slides, these people listed have worked very hard. The Facility Planning Committee, they were the first one. Those folks came back with the initial concepts. They did all the interviewing with our congregation and with staff. And then the Building Committee, which has worked quite hard as well over the last year or so, and will certainly have quite a bit of heavy lifting to do over the next year to 2 years as well. So that is the last slide regarding construction and finances. So any questions on that piece of it? Yes. Let's get you a mic and then we'll ask.
Two just quick questions. One on overall timing of the project and funding. From everything that's been presented, just from my own perspective and from a timing standpoint, in order to have the preschool in their final place, it would almost make sense to do phase 1, and then as soon as phase 1 is over, do phase 2. I mean, and granted, that would mean a very successful capital campaign followed
Right.
by another very successful capital campaign.
Correct.
And I'm, again, not trying to be a naysayer, but I'm just trying to wonder, like, do we have the financial capability to do that? And that's, I think, it was something that Danny said, if we can continue praying for the Lord to lead us in that direction. But I think that's the kind of just the way that the phases are laid out. It really seems like if we're going to approve phase 1, the last thing I'd want to see is, well, we did this phase 1, we have this nice fellowship hall, but now it's kind of like half done, the project is half done.
Right.
And now it's 5-10 years later and we haven't done phase 2. I'd hate to see that.
Right.
That's maybe more of a comment than a question.
Right.